interested in. Sanchina Samshayo Mayam Tava Suktasina Vivo Upayatrapi Bhagavan Mano Me Sampradavati
Uvacha Sanchina Samsayo Mayam Tava Shuktasina Vibo Ubayanchapi Bhagavan Mano Me Sampradavati Vidura Uvacha Sanchina Samsayo Mayam Tava Suktasina Vibo Ubayachapi Bhagavan Mano Me Sampradavati Vidura Uvacha Sanchina Samsayo Mayam Tava Shuktasina Vibo Ubayachapi Bhagavan Mano Me Sampradavati. Please chant. Okay, everybody good? Vidura Vacha Sansalya Samsayo Vidura Uvacha. Vidura said, Sanchina, cut off, samsaya, doubts, mayam, unto me, tava, your, shukta asina, by the weapon of convincing words. Vibho, O my Lord, upayatra api, both in God and in the living entity. Bhagavan, O powerful one. Mana, mind. Me, my. Sampradavati, perfectly entering. Vidura said, O powerful sage, my Lord, all my doubts about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities have now been removed by your convincing words. My mind is now perfectly entering into them. Please repeat. Vidura said, O powerful sage, my Lord, all my doubts about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities have now been removed by your convincing words. My mind is now perfectly entering into them. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The science of Krishna, or the science of God and the living entities, is so subtle that even a personality like Vidura has to consult persons like the sage Maitreya. Doubts about the eternal relationship of the Lord and the living entity are created by mental speculators in different ways. But the conclusive fact is that the relationship of God and the living entity is one of the predominator and the predominated. The Lord is the eternal predominator, and the living entities are eternally predominated. Real knowledge of this relationship entails reviving the lost consciousness to this standard. And the process for such revival is devotional service to the Lord. By clearly understanding from authorities like the sage Maitreya, one can become situated in real knowledge, and the disturbed mind can thus be fixed on the progressive path. Could someone bring to me the first canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam? Thank you very much. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurlamitam Dina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shita Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagadatam Saganam Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakavitam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jaitam Surito Pangor Mama Namater Gati Matsarva Svapadam Mojo Radha Madana Mohano Dibrid Bindiranya Kolpajumada Srimad Ratnagara Svingasanasto Srimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prestalabi Savyamano Smarami Shriman Rasarasarambi Bamsi Batatatastita Karshan Venus Fanar Gopir Gopinatha Shri Estuna Taptanganjan Gorangi Radhe Brindavaneshri Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpadrubis Chakribis and Nubi Eva Chapatitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Nama Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gora Bhaktamrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Vidura Vacha Sanchina Samsayo Mayam Tava Sukshakshina Vibo Ubayatrapi Bhagavan Manome Sampradavati. Vidura said, O powerful sage, my Lord, all my doubts about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities have now been removed by your convincing words. My mind is now perfectly entering into them. So this is a beautiful section of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam where Vidura is glorifying Maitreya Muni in regards to the authorized the authoritative presentation of the science of Krishna or the science of God and the living entities. The sages of Naimisharanya, when they were blessed by Sutta Goswami, who was present for the recitation of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, they glorified him similarly. We think that we have met you, just that we may accept you as captain of the ship to guide us across this very difficult ocean of Kali Yuga, which diminishes all good qualities of the human being. So the process of accepting the spiritual master, equal, if not more important, especially from our position, is not so much the question, who is the bona fide spiritual master, but who is or how can I become the bona fide disciple? If one is not interested in genuine inquiry to the absolute truth, one has no business approaching a spiritual master simply to ask questions which can be readily answered by shopkeepers in the marketplace. In other words, we don't approach a spiritual master to solve our economic, psychological, sociological, or emotional problems, because these are all temporary affairs of the material world. But we approach the spiritual master to achieve Brahma Gyan, Brahma Jignasya. Now is the time to inquire for the bona fide spiritual master. And he can give you Shreya Uttamam, not prayas, temporary flickering benefit, but Shreyas, long-term benefit. And what type of Shreyas? Shreya Uttamam, the topmost benefit. And that topmost benefit is knowledge of the relationship of the living entity with the personality of Godhead. Even Krishna himself, he accepts Sandipani Muni as the spiritual master. And again, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a short time later, Prabhupada writes in one purport in the first canto, within the memory of everyone, Lord Chaitanya has appeared in this age of iron industry. So some 535 years ago, Prabhupada is assuming or expecting all of us to remember 535 years ago. That's another discussion, but it's very interesting, poignant, and beautiful. So Lord Chaitanya, my memory serves, at the age of 16 or 20, he met Ishvara Puri and received initiation. Anyway, after he received initiation into chanting Hare Krishna by Ishvara Puri, became a madly God-intoxicated soul. He's a supreme soul personality of Godhead, but he's showing the path, how to be the proper spiritual master, by first being the proper disciple. My spiritual master, he's telling the Mayavadis at Benares, head by Prakashananda Saraswati, considered me a fool. You are not fit to study Vedanta philosophy. That was their challenge. Mayavadis, they think they're so advanced and elevated because they doubts about the eternal relationship of the Lord and the living entity are created by mental speculators in different ways. Similarly, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, I can understand Vedanta Sutra very clearly, but your explanations have just simply put a cloud in front of the shining sun. And as Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya later in his completely enlivened and converted devotional self said, "Sir, I spent my life eating dry oil cakes in which all the juice had been extracted. To turn me into a pure devotee is certainly the work of very great powers. You are indeed the Supreme Personality of Godhead." And all the devotees, especially his brother-in-law Gopinath Bhattacharya, was so pleased by the conversion, and they can understand the potency of Lord Chaitanya. So, in this age of Kali, Ishvara Puri taught Hare Nam, Hare Nam, Hare Nam Eva Kevalam, chanting the holy name. This is the only way. You should simply chant the holy name. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead's chanting the holy name. Of course, Ishvara Puri, because he was the most submissive, surrendered, and dear disciple of Madhavendra Puri, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in his Guru Parampara Bhajan, he glorifies Ishvara Puri. Because of his discipleship, he became qualified to be the spiritual master of Jagat Guru Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the spiritual master of the entire universe, all cosmic manifestation. What to speak of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam itself. Such a personality as the literary incarnation of God, Srila Vyasadeva, in the chapter Appearance of Sri Narada, in the first canto. Out of compassion, he wasn't motivated out of any sense of false ego for name, fame, profit, adoration, and distinction. The great sage was very kind to the ignorant masses, edited the Vedas so that he might be assimilated by less intellectual men. He had far-reaching powers. He was Trikalagna. He was Janak Chakshu. He saw the sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas are means by which a people's occupations could be purified at the... Yeah, here we are. 17 and 18. This great sage who was fully equipped in knowledge could see through his transcendental vision the deterioration of everything material due to the influence of the age. He could also see that the faithless people in general would be reduced in duration of life and would be impatient due to lack of goodness. Thus he contemplated the welfare of men in all statuses and orders of life. So this, Srila Prabhupada has taught us very emphatically that this is Vaishnava. He's always thinking how to do good to the people. Not just thinking, but working very hard. In following Srila Prabhupada, put together by Yadubhar and Vishaka Prabhu's number 2, the first thing you will see is amazing color footage of the greatest and most triumphant and largest festival in ISKCON to date, July 1970, the San Francisco Rath Yatra, which was put on by a score of amazing devotees led by Madhudwis Prabhu. And when Srila Prabhupada had come from Los Angeles on a flight, and he was being taken to the airport in San Francisco to fly back to Los Angeles, and it was an ecstatic festival. There were like 20, 30,000 hippies, young people, and in the Family Dog Auditorium of Chet Helms, that's where all the Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, and all the concerts took place. There were just so many people there taking it in such ecstasy, chanting and dancing. The Sankirtan leg of the movement was at its highest pitch in those years, and Prabhupada came in, and Prabhupada's presence had such ecstasy. There was such ecstasy and such gravity and weight that it was not uncommon for even non-devotees to bow down to Srila Prabhupada. So an integral part of the San Francisco culture back then were the Hells Angels, really like heavy bikers, leather jackets, swear words, cigarettes, and, nunchucks and billy clubs and weapons and, smelly, haven't bathed in a long time. And they bowed down too, all of them. And Prabhupada, seeing this collection of all different types of people, he said, I have come, he said, my dear frustrated youth of America, I have come to turn all the hippies into happies. And that just like unleashed like a tidal wave of ecstasy. It was like pure love of Godhead from Srila Prabhupada's heart just like inundated the thousands of people. And the whole afternoon was just spent in ecstatic chanting and dancing. That was basically Prabhupada's speech. A few more words, not very long and very much. So Madhu Dwis, he's kneeling at the car. Prabhupada, he opened the door and he's like kneeling by the curb. Prabhupada, how did you like the festival? And Srila Prabhupada, he was like, he was ecstatic and was smiling ear to ear. He just took Madhu Dwis, he took his whole head, put it in his lap, and was like rubbing his head and rubbing him up and down his back and saying, I loved it. And like all the devotees who were just like, they felt like they were being like stroked and embraced and petted like that. And then Prabhupada went on to say, this is Vaishnava. Why did we work so hard to put on this festival? One devotee, Gaur Hari Prabhu, his memoir is there in that section. He was put in charge of making the feast for 30,000 people. But he said in those days, because of the Prabhupada's empowerment and his inspiration, we could climb Mount Everest. There was no question of like, me or I'm cold or I'm wet or I'm like tired. You would just overcome it and just get on with it and just make it happen. And it was that they had so much fruit, like watermelons being distributed. At one point, they gave up cutting the watermelons and they were giving everybody whole watermelons to take home from a truck. So this is Vaishnava. He's always thinking of how to give the fallen conditioned souls the Shreya Uttamam, the topmost benefit. He's working very, very hard. And Prabhupada arriving in Australia, Sydney, I think 1973 or 4. Anyway, you can research the year. It says, do you people work? Do you work? And said, I work harder than you. I'm traveling around the world 3 or 4 times a year. I'm only sleeping 3 or 4 hours a day. I get up at 1 o'clock in the morning to write books. It just completely, The devotee works very, very hard for the sake of saving the fallen conditioned souls. So he's contemplating how to divide the Vedas from its original 1 into 4. He entrusted in his disciples. He assimilated. The sage Vyasadeva was very kind to the ignorant masses, edited the Vedas so they might be assimilated by less intelligent class of men. Out of compassion, not out of false ego or out of false pride or out of lust, greed, anger, or envy. But out of compassion, he thought it wise that this would enable men to achieve the ultimate goal of life. So he compiled the Mahabharata. But still his mind was not satisfied, although he engaged himself in working for the total welfare of all people. So he's thinking within himself. He at once began to reflect because he knew the essence of religion. And he said within himself, I have under strict disciplinary vows unpretentiously worshipped the Vedas, the spiritual master, and the altar of sacrifice. I have also abided by the rulings and have shown the import of disciplic succession through the explanation of the Mahabharata, that even the fallen people of this age of Kali can see the path of religion. sage began to search out the cause of not being satisfied at heart. Perfection is never attained until one is satisfied at heart. That's a good one. This satisfaction of heart has to be searched out beyond matter. We should always be very alert to that point, and that is the qualification of the disciple. How do we show our love for the spiritual master? It's a devotee asking that question. It was Prabhupada's original disciple, Hari Vilas, and he was thinking within himself, Prabhupada would say something like, well, we have all these feelings of love in our heart. And Prabhupada's answer was, you show your love for the spiritual master by keeping your vow. You have vowed never again a sinful activity and chant 16 rounds. You keep your vow. That's how you show your love for the spiritual master. And it's just like hit everybody like, whew. Because you think about it, it's no joke. In this age of Kali Yuga, I will never again engage in illicit sex, meat eating, gambling, intoxication. And to always maintain the standard of devotional service by chanting a minimum of 16 attentive rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Prabhupada said, don't be surprised who leaves, be surprised who stays. So, to maintain that vow of renunciation and detachment for the rest of one's life, that's very deep, deep love. No one can understand the import of the Vedas without having undergone a strict disciplinary vow in disciplic succession. I'm feeling incomplete, though I myself am fully equipped with everything required by the Vedas. Purification of the living being submerged in matter is made possible by the prescribed activities in the Vedas, but the ultimate achievement is different. Unless it is attained, the living being, even though fully equipped, cannot be situated in the transcendently normal stage. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his approach to propitiating Srila Gaura Das Babaji to accept him as his disciple, such a personality in such a qualified position, he's a genius. He's a Shrutidar. He's like living encyclopedia. In knowledge of everything, practically speaking. Still, he understood, unless he received the mercy of a truly established Maha-Bhagavat devotee. Forget, external appearances that he's like Gaura Das Babaji is Avaduta, but he could understand the position of the pure devotee and all of his knowledge and aristocracy and everything. He saw this is all useless, and unless I get the mercy of this great devotee. Srila Vyasadeva appeared to have lost the clue and therefore felt dissatisfaction. So in the purport today, the standard of devotional service is described as understanding the position of the predominator and ourself as the predominated. And knowledge of this relationship entails reviving one's lost consciousness, Krishna consciousness, to this standard. The dissatisfaction which was being felt by Srila Vyasadeva is expressed here in his own words. This was felt for the normal condition. When one declares himself a non-devotee, it is understood that such a person is not in a sane condition of life. Pure living entities are called devotees. The Lord is like a diamond, and the devotee is a golden band. Together they enhance each other, and they eternally glitter and sparkle together. I envy no one. I'm impartial to no one, but one who renders service is a friend to me, is in me. Samoham sarvabhuteshu. Unless one is fixed in the normal condition of service, neither the Lord nor the living being can become fully satisfied. The cleansing of the Gundicha temple, all the straws and dust and little pricklets, all must be washed away. And Lord Chaitanya wanted to make sure they would never come back, and he thoroughly cleansed the temple even twice, making one's heart pure and spotless and a fit and comfortable place for the Lord to sit down. What is that beautiful bhajan? I'm propitiating the Lord to sit within the temple of my heart. Krishna Murari. Yeah. I think it's in the expanded songbook. So then Narada appears. Just at this time, Vyasadeva is regretting his defects. And then, of course, chapter 5, he points out ultimately that because you did not directly point out the devotional service of the Lord, and then on he encourages him to directly write about Krishna, his pastimes, his entourage, his name, fame, form, qualities, and hence we have the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And at the same time, Narada Muni predicted 5,000 years ago the appearance of Srila Prabhupada, which was subsequently confirmed and predicted over the millennium and centuries. Those words which do not describe Krishna, or that those words which do, is a different creation meant to bring about a revolution in the impious lives of the world's misdirected civilization. So first there will be such literatures, and then, how will people get these literatures? 5,000 years ago, especially, even 500 years ago, only the very, very rich and aristocratic and pious and religious persons, you would have to pay, for someone to write the book by hand. Many people were illiterate. It was, you read in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, many of his devotees were illiterate. Education was a luxury. So that people would know how to read and that the books would be distributed. When Srinivasacharya and Shamananda Prabhu and Narottam Das Thakur in the order of Jiva Goswami, they were taking the most precious, treasured manuscripts of the Goswamis to the devotees in Bengal. They weren't bringing like we bring a truck and it has 50,000 books in it. It's one copy of all the things, to be kept in a certain place. And when Maharaj Rahugana came to his senses as to who was actually Jud Bharat, a great advanced Paramahamsa, and received his instruction, it is not at all wonderful that simply by being covered by the dust of your lotus feet, one immediately attains the platform of pure devotional service to Adhokshaja, which is not available even to great demigods like Brahma. By associating with you just for a moment, I am now freed from all argument, false prestige, and lack of discrimination, which are the roots of entanglement in the material world. Now I am free from all these problems. Association with pure devotees certainly frees one
from the material clutches. This is certainly true of King Rahugana's association with Jud Bharat. King Rahugana was immediately freed from the misgivings of material association. The arguments offered by pure devotees to their disciples are so convincing that even a dull-headed disciple is immediately enlightened with spiritual knowledge. Vidura said, "O powerful sage, my Lord, all my doubts about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and living entities have now been removed by your convincing words. My mind is now perfectly entering into them. Make the words of the spiritual master one with one's heart. Do not desire to have anything else remain within my heart. Love for the lotus feet or the order of the spiritual master raises one to the highest goal." Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. 9 o'clock on the dot. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Vanchakalpatarubhyascha ki jai.